Good evening, everyone. Hello. Well, I'm Barry Edelstein, Erna Fincy Viterbi, Artistic Director of the Old Globe, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our Carl and Vicki Zeiger Insight Seminar for Dracula, a Comedy of Terrors. Wonderful, wonderful show that started previews Friday night. Then we took Saturday night off for our gala, which was spectacular, the Globe Gala. I hope some of you were there. And then the show had another preview Sunday night. And tonight we get to talk to the writers and the director about the show. I want to thank Vicki and Carl Zeiger, who are somewhere here. There you are in the back, for your support of this series. Vicki and Carl, stalwart supporters of the Old Globe. Vicki's a former board chair, and they've been with this place through thick and thin for a very long time, and we love them very much and are very grateful to them for their support. Okay, let me introduce our special guests tonight, Steve Rosen and Gordon Greenberg, who co-wrote the show, and Gordon directed it. Steve Rosen, represented at the Old Globe by Crime and Punishment, a comedy, and Ebenezer Scrooge's Big San Diego Christmas Show, both co-written by Steve and Gordon and directed by Gordon. And Killing Time, you two guys write that together, or was that just you? You did a commission during our COVID shutdown. Steve has co-written and composed the Griswold's Broadway Vacation, which is coming up. The other, Josh Cohen, a spectacular musical. The Secret of My Success. He's the podcast Rolling Calls and the off-Broadway variety show Don't Quit Your Night Job. He's got 5 Drama Desk nominations, 2 Lucille Lortel Awards, an Off-Broadway Alliance Award, a Joseph Jefferson Award, and he just needs bigger and bigger shelves in his house to hold all that stuff. He's also an actor whom you'll recognize from many, many appearances on television and stage, Steve Rosen. Gordon Greenberg, who co-wrote this wonderful show and directed it, has, I will select among his many, many, many long shows, most prominently, the recent Broadway debut of The Heart of Rock and Roll, which played here at the Old Globe in 2018. He directed Working here at the Old Globe before my time, but which makes him know more about this place than I do. On Broadway, Holiday Inn at the Roundabout. It was also on PBS's Great Performances. Off Broadway, he directed Dracula, a Comedy of Terrors. We'll talk about that. Jacques Brel, Working. In London, he directed Guys and Dolls, starring Rebel Wilson, and there were 6 Olivier Award nominations, most recently The Baker's Wife and Barnum. In Toronto, he's directed a million things. He's directed in Los Angeles at the Williamstown Theater Festival, some of the biggest stages both in the United States and in Britain. So please welcome to our stage Gordon Greenberg and Steve Rosen. Too many, a lot of things. Too many things. Too many things. You're such a big deal. You're a big deal and you're a busy guy. Well, welcome, fellas. How's it going? How's it going?
Good.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
that's,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we're just going to talk at the exact same time. It's going great. I just got here fairly recently, so Gordon will be able to tell you the play-by-play of how this rehearsal process has gone. But the reactions of the audiences on the first 2 performances so far have been fantastic. It is such a joy to be back here in beautiful San Diego. I know I speak for Gordon when I say how lucky we feel for an opportunity to come to not only a theater over and over again, but one of the greatest theaters in the entire nation, who is so supportive to our work and has allowed us to sort of create a voice for ourselves and our work here. And we're working with a company of performers and a crew that are nonpareil. These people, we were saying that we did the show in New York, and that we could just move this entire company to New York City, and we would be just as happy. So it's going good. I guess that's the answer to the question.
That's great. Gordon, you want to add to that?
This is a joy. Steve and I feel very honored to have the Globe as kind of an artistic home, and to have Barry as a friend and colleague and collaborator. Coming here is always a joy and inspiring, and it's like the theater you could invent if if someone said, "What's your perfect theater?" Well, it would be in a beautiful city with a lot of smart audience members, and at an institute such as yourselves, also very attractive, and. And to have simultaneously musicals and new plays and classics and Shakespeare going on in this vibrant sort of square, it's really exciting and rarefied, and it smells a lot better than Times Square. So we're happy to be here. The show itself I feel it has deepened here just the comic value doing it in the round. I had said to our scenic designer, who comes from Serbia, not far from Transylvania, I would like for this to feel like you're walking into a Romanian disco. And her husband was here Sunday night, who is a Serbian heart surgeon, and he said it feels like a Romanian disco. So it's real, so get ready. But that interactive nature of doing it in the round and this such an immersive, the White Theater offers such a unique perspective on a show, and I've always thought, the place to fall in love with theater is in a place like this where you're up close and you can read the actors' minds, and that energy from the stage really gets under your skin, as opposed to seeing something at the Pantages or, whatever the touring house is, which is wonderful, but you're seeing it from a distance. It's a grander, sort of slightly less immediate experience, and I feel like right here in the White, we have the advantage of constant surprise, because there's always another aisle, always another vom, another entrance, and that's been a lot of fun.
That's great. So I want to talk about this style that the two of you have invented that is now familiar to the Old Globe's audience from many years of watching Scrooge, and then from Crime and Punishment. Now this show, 5 actors, everybody plays a million parts. There's this wonderful vaudevillian sensibility. We'll get back to that. The first thing I want to ask you, though, is actually I don't know, which is how you started your writing partnership. What first brought you together, how you knew each other before you started writing, and what made you say, I want to write a play with you?
Well, we really met a long time. What was it, 20-something years ago?
Yeah, 2005.
Almost 20 years ago. I was programming for a small theater in New York called Ars Nova, which is like a 99-seat theater in Midtown. It happens to be a block from his current house. But they do new and risky work.
It's like an incubator, like an artistic incubator.
And then they said, why don't you find individuals from the casts of Broadway shows who need their own platform and who you think could create a really interesting one-person show? And back then, those people included Idina Menzel, and she did a thing about her former job, which was as a wedding singer in Long Island. And then Steve was someone I just admired in Spamalot. He was one of the stars of that show in the original cast. And I was like, this guy's going to have something really funny, and he did. And we bonded after that. And then I directed a small tour of Guys and Dolls a couple of years later, and he played Nathan, and that's where we became pals.
Yeah,
right?
that was it. It was. We really reconnected on that Guys and Dolls. I'd sort of forgotten about that was how we weren't already writing together, because at this point I feel like we've been writing together like our whole lives, because when you work together, you spend so much time together. You sort of, it seems as though we've been married now for 15, 20 years.
We're not married.
We are not married.
We're not dating.
We're not.
Okay.
Yes,
We're friends.
We are friends. Maybe I know. No. But yeah, so we met in that way, and I had always known Gordon's name because Gordon has always been known throughout New York as one of the most working directors. At least at that point, I had just sort of started, and it was in Backstage magazine, and it really, that's where all the actors, before I had gotten Spamalot, you look through Backstage, and it really felt like on every page there was another thing that Gordon was sort of working on. And so when I was invited to come and do this thing, working with him initially in the first place, I was very complimented, because I knew that this was someone who was making things. And then when he was doing Guys and Dolls, we got a chance to hang out there. We got along so well, and we were making each other laugh in a very sort of fast, easy way, and developed a language with each other. And Gordon, always making things, had an opportunity to write something, and he asked me if I would be interested in just sort of trying to crack the outline of a musical called Secret of My Success. which was based on a Michael J. Fox movie, and I had been writing I have another writing partner. I was writing with him at the time, but I went to Gordon's office and he and I sat there, and it was just like the movies where we had all these note cards and we were filling walls with note cards and creating stories and stuff. And that was sort of the birth of our working together. Now, this style is very different than what we were first working on. This style came about because a theater wanted to do a Christmas Carol, but they didn't want to license one every year from a place. And they were like, well, maybe we can do something specific to our region, but it can't cost a lot of money. So Gordon and,
Actually, well, it's something like that. I had directed a bunch at this, like a small, old summer stock called the Bucks County Playhouse, which Moss Hart helped start.
Very famous place. It's in sort of southern New Jersey, like western New Jersey.
On the border
right?
of Pennsylvania, New Jersey.
New Hope.
New Jersey border, New Hope, Pennsylvania. It's extremely famous, old playhouse. You ever get to see it? It's beautiful, intimate, wonderful place.
It's a little Christmassy village.
Yeah, cute little touristy little village in New Jersey.
Yeah, so after I had written and directed Holiday Inn, they're like, oh, he's the Christmas guy. Why don't you direct our Christmas little show?
Gordon Greenberg, the Christmas guy.
Exactly. Clearly. And so
Worked for Irving Berlin.
I know. So I started doing all these little Christmas shows that existed, like Plaid Tidings. I mean, none of them were particularly great, but they were fine and popular and fun because it's Christmas. It's fun. It's like a Hallmark movie. You're just like light and airy, and your goal is simply to uplift and entertain. And I loved it. And then after a couple of years, they were like, "Now can you do a Peanuts Charlie Brown Christmas?" And I'm like, "This has gone too far. Can I please just write something?" And they said, "What are you gonna write?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Just give me my parameters." And they were like, 5 people, no set. Basically, that's where it started. And then I went to Steve, and I was like, what if we set it there? Because Bucks County, I thought I was really clever because I knew that Buckinghamshire in England, Bucks County came from that. And so it was an early version of what we eventually enriched and expanded and adapted for San Diego, which is the show that has been here for the last few years, Ebenezer Scrooge's big San Diego Christmas show. And we love it. And I feel like that it finally became itself here, but we cooked it there. And it's now published, the San Diego version. And when you go to San Fran and you buy your script, there's people in Denver and other cities doing it. And we've published it with like Mad Libs. You remember Mad Libs? So it's fill in the blank. So there are plenty of haunted places in Denver. Such as instead of the Chargers fan clubs, we put like a little asterisk where we'll say, like, name a place that is comedically empty in San Diego, e.g., example was Chargers fan club. We did everything but, like, then explain, because the Chargers left, and it wasn't good feelings.
And do you get emails from people trying out their jokes? Do they
Weirdly, no.
You don't. So they don't let you know what they've done.
This is going to be the first Christmas, because it was just published this past year.
Oh, cool. I'd love to. You should collect the jokes.
I know. I am so curious.
Yeah.
Well, Jackie Wilkie, who always does it here, now lives in Denver, and I was hoping she would do it, but she's at least going to spy for us.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So then we said, let's do another one, right?
Yes.
And that was Crime and Punishment.
Crime and Punishment happened, and we worked on that for 2 years with Danielle, who's here, the dramaturg, Danielle Motto, and Barry. And it was an amazing experience, really, from almost scratch, because we almost entirely discarded the story of Crime and Punishment. But we took the kernel, like the basic idea at the core of it. And then Barry asked about Dracula.
And where did this one come? Did you write it?
Dracula happened to us because someone was aware of Scrooge. A theater in Florida called the Maltz Jupiter.
The Maltz Jupiter.
Named
yeah.
after Mr. Maltz. Literally, it's a guy's name. But that's the theater. It's really nice. It's
the Burt Reynolds, right?
It's
Used
the
to
old.
be.
It's the old Burt Reynolds
the
theater.
old
His mustache is still there,
Is that right? Yeah.
bronzed.
Well, they do still have like the Lonnie Anderson. Like there was like the little secret area where she hung out in Dom DeLuise's kitchen, and it's very 70s.
It is a gorgeous. I mean, they just renovated. It's very nice.
They have renovated. It's a magnificent.
It's a great space.
Okay, so they
So
called up and said, "Do Dracula."
Their idea. They said, "Can you do for Dracula what you did with Scrooge?" And we just said, "Yeah," because anything that takes itself that seriously is ripe for satirizing and sending up. As you know, like the most serious things are also the funniest, and that's why we always look for something that is epic and self-important. So then you can, as they say in England, take the piss. And so that became Dracula. That was at least step one, and we did it at the Maltz as a reading the first time, and my parents lived there, and they had never seen a reading of a play. They had never seen a play that wasn't just fully baked on stage, and they came to see it, and everyone was holding their scripts and throwing the pages, like in Woody Allen's radio days. And so my father kept calling it our radio show. And he was like, "That's a good radio show." I'm like, "No, it will be a show. There will be a set. People will move."
Right.
And then during the pandemic, we thought, let's do it as a radio show. So that was
Got
how
all
it
these
continued.
incredibly famous people to do an audio version of it, right?
Everyone was available.
Yeah, they had nothing else to do, so they did it. Yeah, and it's great. I remember listening to it. So the thing I love about your partnership, there are some writing partnerships where it's like, person A is in charge of story, and person B is in charge of jokes. And they divide up. Like, I'm really good at punchlines, so that I'm going to do that. But you guys aren't that. You're both in it together, talking about everything, talking about the characters, the dramatic structure, the dramaturgy of it, and coming up with great jokes. So will you just talk a little bit about how the mechanics? How do you do it? Do you get on Zoom? Do you meet together? Do you send drafts to each other? How does it work?
I sit on Gordon's lap, and we get in front of a computer, and we just four hands. We try to start typing. No, we break the story down. We find the initial source material, and we talk about the parts of the story that are important, that hold the kernels of truth. What is important about this story, and we also try to highlight things that happen within the story that, if pushed to an extreme, could have a comic effect. And especially in the world of Dracula and in Victorian melodrama, like the initial play written by Hamilton Dean the entire show is a bunch of people wandering around saying, something happened to this woman. I wonder who did it. And there's a new guy in town who's like, well, if you want to leave her with me, I'll watch her while you find out. That no one understands this very simple concept. And so Gordon and I will spit those ideas back and forth with each other, and sometimes we'll go to his house, sometimes we'll hang out at my house, sometimes we'll hang out on the computer and do it that way.
Or at the Hilton Garden Inn.
By
the airport here.
Yeah, we've written stuff all over San Diego. All the times we're here, we're usually writing the next thing. I think if it makes both of us laugh, then it sort of goes in. But Gordon also being a director and me being a voracious theater fan and an actor first, we love the theatricality, the kind of things that you can only see in a theater. So part of the fun is trying to write the show and also think about like how funny it would be if one person had to be all three of these people. So you can find interesting theatrical ways to tell the story. And we come from similar backgrounds. We both grew up going to like theater-centric summer camps, different ones. The competitors, by the way, but like the rivalry is like a dance-off or something. Like, it's not like there's any gang warfare. And both of our dads are pediatric dentists. So
And they're very funny.
No, but I think because of that we're very similar, and we both like to read and what am I missing? What else do we do?
I would say even when we're starting something like Dracula, it's important for us to have some idea at the heart of it that is the play underneath the play. Why are we writing this? And Dracula, which is like we humbly say is just a bunch of dad jokes with, sexy surroundings, we first talked about like this story and what does it mean to have an endless supply of the thing that should be our most precious commodity, life, time. And so for this man, that became both a comic idea and a resonant idea, at least for us, in that we treated him like a playboy from Eastern Europe. He was, as they would have said back in my day, Eurotrash. Because I don't think they say that anymore. I'm probably canceled now. I'm out by Europe. I'm not allowed in. But he can sleep with any woman he wants, any man he wants. He can buy clothes wherever he wants. He can eat as much as he wants, and he still looks great. And you just imagine that, and it's really fun at first. But he's now going on several thousand years, and he's bored. And so that's kind of where we find him, where we meet him. And it was just an interesting idea that if we ever kind of just get sick of laughing or feel like we've had too many donuts for dinner, you can at least go back to that well and say, all right, this is what's underneath it.
Yeah. Now, this show, unlike the others that you guys have done, there's this relationship between Bram Stoker, who wrote the novel, and Oscar Wilde, right? I didn't know until learning from you guys that Bram Stoker was a theater manager in England, and on his spare time, at a very famous theater, in his spare time, he wrote this novel that turned out to be one of the most famous sort of genre novels, right? Pop novels ever. And he was friends with Oscar Wilde, and there's a sort of a gay subtext going on between the two of them and in the Dracula thing. And this production glances at a wonderful New York theater tradition, the Ridiculous Theater Company, from, I guess, 60s, 70s more like, right? Which is an incredibly famous downtown Greenwich Village camp theater company that I would say arguably did an enormous amount to define the culture's sensibility of kind of what we would regard as gay camp humor, right? Right? I don't think that's making too large a claim. The Ridiculous Theater Company, extremely influential. So this show goes into the Bram Stoker stuff, that's his real-life relationship with Oscar Wilde, the weird pansexuality of Dracula, and your love for the sensibility of the Ridiculous Theater Company, right? Which is a really interesting direction for you to take this work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think it started more Mel Brooks, which comes easily to both of us, and we both love old school humor, just anything that happened in the 1950s and 60s, and as we did more research into the novel itself and the context in which it was written, it became apparent that there was probably more to be found in between the lines. So that is something that really emerged over the last couple of years, because we've been developing this since 2018. So gosh, it's a long time now. But when you hear that, it just gives it more layers, more interest, more tentacles, and finding out that Bram Stoker, I didn't know that he was the house manager at the Lyceum Theatre. I thought that was pretty cool. If you've been to like Covent Garden in London, you know where the Lion King is. So he worked there forever, and while he was there, he met Walt Whitman. And there were all these letters. So clearly, he was fascinated by the notion of an outsider, whatever that means to you. And that was what Dracula was a living metaphor of all of that. We wanted to, in some ways, play with that. And then the Ridiculous Theater Company became such a great vehicle for that, because it almost feels a little bit like Panto in England. They have this pantomime tradition where every Christmas they do crazy versions of public domain fairy tales that they can also use pop music for free, I think, because it's Christmas. I'm not sure why, but there's some rule there. And they always have a really ungainly big guy dressed as a girl, and that's called the Dame, and that's kind of part of the fun. And the audience talks back, and they scream things like, "He's right behind you," and they always have the mustache twirly villain. And it's I think a great gateway drug for young people to understand theater and get that it's living, breathing, and it's an exchange. But the Ridiculous Theater Company was doing things like that, where they're interacting with the audience shamelessly, and the fourth wall doesn't really exist. And I would pretentiously say it's Brechtian, like you're always reminding them, like, we're in a theater together, we're doing this together. And maybe the more access we have to digital content and I mean, no one even goes to the movies except me, but like it's all at home, it's all on your phone, it's right here. So being in a space where that energy is coming right at you is just so special, and we wanted to lean in as much as we could to that vibe.
Yeah. Did you, Steve, see the Ridiculous Theater Company in your New York life?
So Charles Ludlam, Charles Ludlam and Everett Quinton were a couple. They were the ones who ran the company. Ludlam had actually passed away before I was able to see anything, but I saw The Mystery of Irma Vep, which is probably their most famous work, which we actually saw production at the Diversionary Theater a couple of years ago here, which was terrific.
Yeah, really good.
And but I got a chance to see it. My father and mother love theater, right? And so anytime we would go out of town, we would look to see what was playing. And I saw Irma Vep for the first time, I think, when I was 9 or 10 in Boston. Just a random production in Boston. And it was two actors, two male presenting actors who, over the course of, was it 2 acts? I think it's 2 acts. Over the course of the evening, probably played about a dozen different characters, and they would swap as quickly as they could on and off stage. So they would leave as one character, yell something as the other character, and come on in the other costume. So they utilize this quick change comedy in a way. Now the stories are a little less intelligible, I think, but it's a traditional like pot boiler. It's based on an old. Yes, it is very much basically the plot of Rebecca, but it is a fascinating play and a fascinating way to do theater. And Monty Python, who I worked with, I work with Eric Idle on Spam a lot. There is a lot of this out of necessity because they were a troupe of 6 guys. Sometimes you have to swap genders because we don't have enough people. And that is sort of how things have developed in this show too, where it's that inherent theatricality of like, we might not have everyone is matching what they present as, but we only have this many people, and so now this person's playing that person. And you suspend your disbelief and you use your imagination. And this cast is so great, sometimes you can't even believe how quickly they are doing some of this stuff.
Yeah, and it requires a real versatility among the performers. And what's been true of all 3 of your shows here, you've been able to find phenomenal knucklehead, wildly imaginative actors to do this stuff as you have here. I'm curious, Gordon, I saw the show in New York, as you know, loved it in New York. It was a very big success and ran for a while off Broadway. You had to make it in the round. There it was in a proscenium. You've got to do this in the round, right? Hard. So tell me a little bit about reimagining the show for our space.
I think part of the change here that is so gratifying is that when it's head on and you're looking at a proscenium, you can hide a lot, and there's a lot of popping in and out. And here we really can't hide anything, so it's even more exposed. For example, half the joke of the show is that the sister, who is being played by an actor who's also playing the doctor of the sister. So when she's ill, we just turn the bed upstage, and you saw the headboard and just fake arms falling over. And we thought that was funny. But now there's no upstage. There's nowhere to turn away. So we just have this crazy mess of hair that we speak to very seriously, like it's life and death. And so that it makes it more absurd and more fun. And I love the fishbowl of it all. And I kind of was well up for the challenge and the fun. The one thing that I was worried about, I think, seems to be we found a way of hopefully making it work when there was a very silly moment when they're going down to the subterranean recesses of Dracula's castle to find his crypt, and they keep going down and they keep going down. And in New York, there was just a bench, and they kept doing that thing where you just pretend you're walking down, and then they acted more and more tired. But here we've got stairs all over, so you can like see them walking down, black out for a second. They suddenly, every time the lights come up, they're back at the top. And it was like just a crazy harebrained scheme, and even the actors were like, "This isn't funny and it's exhausting." And then, and Steve was like, "I doubt this is going to work," but it seems to. It worked twice so far. We'll see. I could eat my words tonight.
Great. It's hilarious. Yeah.
And I got to say, I love the theater in the round element for this show, especially too, because in New York, when you're the playwrights and you want to sort of feel the audience's reaction, you're always in the back of the house, and so you're just trying to gauge it based on the sound of laughter that's going in the opposite direction. And here, it's so much fun to sit in the audience and be able to see the faces of people all around, watching them react to it, watching someone elbow each other about a thing that, you know. And so in that way, too, it's fun. It's a fun way to learn about where the audience is relating and where, you know, we can spice things up, too.
So are you developing a rep company of folks that sort of get your style? I mean, Orville, who's not in this production, but, you know, Orville Mendoza, who's been in a bunch of them, you know, he's like an inspiration to you, right? Sort of a muse.
Love him. And pretty much all the actors we've worked with have been amazing. And I guess it becomes like boot camp. Like you go through it, you vibe it with the audience and from each other. And then there are the experienced ones like Orville who bring a sensibility. And then he kind of passes it along to the next group. But for sure, anytime we're writing something, we're thinking about, you know, Giselle could play this, and Orville would be funny here, and you know, you start to just get a feel for it. Yeah. And I'm very grateful that there are people who have that much talent that will take that leap of faith for us, because some of the stuff is pretty stupid, but you have to take it seriously, and it means them really trusting us.
And I will say, Gordon, shut your ears for a second. A lot of it also is because Gordon is such a fabulous director, and that he is able to explain the style of what we're writing to people, because a lot of actors, when faced with doing comedy, will think, I have got to be funny. And Gordon has just such a wonderful way of bringing out the quality of what we're trying to do. It helps that the director is also the writer, but just the way he works with performers, it's just astounding. And I am amazed that I get to work with someone like this every day. I feel very, very lucky.
The two of you have a really wonderful thing going, and you know, we're talking about what the next one is going to be for us, the next show that you guys write for the Globe. But what else do you have cooking? Do you, together and separately? I'd love just to share with everybody what you're working on.
Well, together we are always we have a bunch of our shows that we've done are in different stages of development, that we are finding homes for, new chances to do productions, to either get them into New York or to get them out to the world. We individually, I'm working on a couple of musicals right now. I'm working on a musical based on the National Lampoon's Vacation franchise. We got hired to write a musical that is the Griswold family going on vacation to New York City to see a Broadway show. And it is called Broadway Vacation, Griswold's Broadway Vacation. So we did a production in Seattle. We're doing another workshop of it in New York coming up. And I'm also working on another musical we're doing a lot of London stuff, but not together, but we'll be in there at the same time. Another musical that's going to be workshopping in London next summer, that's being directed and choreographed by Casey Nicholaw, based on a Sony film that I'll tell you about when the cameras aren't on.
And Gordon?
I've been writing. I'm working on a musical about Picasso. With Stephen Schwartz, who wrote Wicked, and a playwright called Caridad Svich. And so we have been working on that for a couple of years, slowly, because we were working on it with, so gossipy, with Antonio Banderas, and he was supposed to launch it at his theater, but it's really hard to get his attention, and so we have decided to just proceed, and either he'll come back to it, or Raul Esparza will do it, or someone else wonderful. So we're starting on that again when I get back, and then a new musical that's very embryonic, based on a Japanese manga, called Seven Shakespeares. Of all things.
Sounds great. I've got to check that out. And why do these things take so long?
Oh my God!
Like, why do these projects take so long?
Because everyone has to do so many jobs, like, just to survive.
Yeah.
I feel like back in the day, you read, like, did you ever read Something Wonderful? The Rodgers and Hammerstein and Rodgers and Hart biography. It's so good. It's such a, if you love Golden Age musicals, as I do, and that whole world, it's a beautiful book to read. It's a very compelling characterization of Lorenz Hart, who was a caution. I mean, a really tragic life. But they talk about writing a show. And the night after one show opened, Oklahoma, whatever it was. The next morning, they had their first meeting for the next show. And within a year, that show opened. So they always did it within a year, but I think it's because they worked with a singularity of focus, and everyone was there from the beginning. Even the designers, I think, got involved early. And now we work in fragments like we do everything else. And so it takes a while for all of those pieces to come together. And I guess sometimes it's faster than others, but usually it's both the creative process that takes forever, and as you know, the logistics.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you do a musical in San Diego, and then it's 2 years later, it maybe goes to another regional theater someplace. Then 2 years after that, it goes to New York, and you started writing it 3 years before you came to San Diego. Next thing you know, it's a decade getting one of these things off the ground. It's peculiar. And we have a mutual friend, Jeffrey, who is a big producer, who said, these things don't have to take 7 years. He keeps saying that. And then every musical that he works on takes 7 years. It's peculiar. And I don't, it's weird for me to say I don't really get it, because I'm in charge of a lot of these processes, I'm the guy who says, hey, let's do something, and it still takes 2 years before a play gets on.
Do you think it would take that long if there were no other outside pressures, like food, shelter, family?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Although something I do often think is that the creative process involves an awful lot of cul-de-sacs and dead ends. And so you need time to recover from that. It's like you go for a walk, like you're working all day and you're writing, and you just dry out. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to walk in the canyon behind my house, and that'll clear my head and I'll get a new idea. So it feels analogous to that, that 6-month break between the production at the Old Globe and then the production at the Kennedy Center in D.C. is when everybody takes the time to think the next set of ideas that the piece needs.
You know who's so smart about that? Stephen Schwartz. That's how they did Wicked. I know that he insisted they opened in San Francisco and took 6 months before they came to New York, even though they could have gone sooner. And he's doing it with Queen of Versailles now. It was their first throw everything at the wall production, which is a vehicle for Kristen Chenoweth, in Boston. And he's like, we're not even going to talk again for 6 months. Like, we all need time. And that's wise and hard to do, especially for someone like me, who, like, the minute I set my mind on something, I want to go. But sometimes sitting back for a little bit and letting it marinate, your unconscious does a lot of the work for you.
Yeah. And you used to act, Gordon. You don't act anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I don't perform.
You miss it, Steve's still acting, but but you're not acting.
I feel like I do it in the rehearsal room.
Yeah.
Like, you could be goofy and funny, and sometimes I secretly give line readings. Let's take it from, what are you doing here?
Sneaky.
But, like, acting on stage, I could never do. I could, like, if it was a TV thing or a film thing where you say a couple of lines and you just have to whisper and not move, that's fine. But I think, like, the athleticism and the kind of training that you need to go through to be ready to be on stage 8 times a week that's huge. And I don't pretend that I could ever just jump right back into it. Sometimes I look back, like, at these clips on YouTube of, like, when I was in How to Succeed, the Matthew Broderick, not the Harry Potter, and it's like I watched Brotherhood of Man and me dancing. I'm like, how did I do that? I can't even dance at a party. Like, I mean,
yeah, that's amazing. It was just with Jess Stone, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, we were in that together.
Yeah,
that's so funny. And Chris Gattelli and Joanne Hunter.
Wow. Yeah,
the whole cast has become directors.
They're all directors. Funny. They all quit that. It's too hard.
Too much dancing.
Too hard to run up and down the stairs. I'm going to direct. Well, hey, guys, thank you. The show's so funny. And, you are on a short list of writers, the two of you, who the Globe just will keep on producing, The wonderful thing about being a theater like this is that you can become close with artists. And we know that the history of the theater, going back to the Greeks, is driven by the writers who are there, right? Somebody was the producer who said to Sophocles, let's do your next one, And theaters are defined by the writers. Moliere had a theater where he was home, and Brecht had a theater where he was home, and Shakespeare had a theater where he was home. And the spectacular thing about my job is that I've been able to develop a family of a half a dozen writers that anything they write, the Globe will do. And it's so wonderfully great to have the two of you on
Did you know
that
Moliere
list.
died on stage?
Moliere did die on stage.
I
That's
love
true.
that story. While
Yeah.
performing in his own play called The Imaginary Invalid
Yep.
about a hypochondriac.
Yeah. Yep, and he died. That's a true story. He died on
Someone
stage.
should write that play.
Yeah.
Some French person.
I'll bet some French person has. Yeah. Steve, you're going to say?
No, I was going to come up with a joke, but I decided
Oh,
to screw
okay.
it.
All right. Great. Anyway, so I'm just so grateful to the two of you for bringing so much joy and laughter to the Globe. Scrooge will be back next year. Scrooge is not in this season because Dracula has extended so many times. We decided to do program Dracula at Halloween. Duh. And it's extended already 3 times. And so it has crowded out the ability for us to program Ebenezer Scrooge's Big San Diego Christmas show. But that will be back at the Old Globe in 2025. And Gordon, we're hatching up a plan for you to come and direct here next year, which we will soon be announcing. And we're talking about what the next Rosen and Greenberg or Greenberg and Rosen project is going to be.
Is
I'm
anyone
gonna
a
be
real
playing-
estate broker in town? Because I want.
Yeah, got to get you a place.
I'm going to do my one-man Moliere play where I actually die on stage.
Okay, it's in next season. All right, so guys, I'm so grateful to both of you. The show's spectacular and funny. Can't wait for all of you to see it. Gordon Greenberg and Steve Rosen.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Barry. An honor.